start in this industry?
Okay, I got my start. I am originally from Texas. I went to the University of Texas and got a degree in radio, television, film, and I frankly just got lucky and was able to kind of weasel my way into a job at United Talent Agency in the mailroom, which is essentially how the agencies are set up. They apprentice young agents as essentially as assistants to more established agents. So I did that for a couple of years because it's a good entryway into the industry because it's kind of a nexus of information and you get to meet a lot of people and you kind of get to see an overview of the industry. But what was different about me is I started in literary, meaning that I worked with writers and directors initially. So I went from working for a literary agent, and then I ran their story department, which basically does coverages, i.e. book reports on scripts. And then I left and was a film executive for about 4 or 5 years. So I did a lot of I worked in the independent market. So I went to Cannes and Sundance and places like that. And I did that for a little while. And then I got dissatisfied with the business and I left for like 6 months. And then I came back and I started all over again. But kind of in a fortuitous accident, I wound up working in talent. So I started working with actors at the Gersh agency for one of the partners there. And then I left and I worked at Evolution Management as an assistant. And then I started my own management company back in 2004. So I've been doing this. Archetype's been around. It started out of my apartment in 2004, and we've just been kind of like slowly and steadily kind of moving along. So today there are 3 talent managers and 1 literary manager at the company. And so there's 4 of us at this point. And we represent people from across the spectrum. You know, our main business is in actors. If you ask me to be a little bit more specific, I can say that we're probably more leading man, leading lady than we are anything else. We definitely carry some character people on our roster, but it's not really what we're designed to do. We're more into if you're going to be, on a series or above a title, that's kind of what we're after. And then on the literary side, we deal a lot with genre. So we deal a lot with like the world of DC and Marvel and Lucasfilm, like those, and those are basically that's our bread and butter. We deal a lot in the animation space. So like things like Rebels and the DC animated movies. Our guys write those, and that's what the business that we're in. So that's kind of our management side. And then we do production as well. So we're attached to, at this point mostly TV. The project that we have currently set up and we're working on is a project called Hiding in Time, which is set up with MGM Television, which we're executive producers on. And then also we have a lot of content creators on our client roster as well. So the shows The Boys and Happy, we represent the co-creator of those underlying properties. So so that's kind of cool when you have like 2 series that one of your people kind of created it. It's kind of a fun thing. But yeah, so that's kind of how I started and what we are at this point.
So cool. All the different kind of aspects that you guys manage, the different sides of the industry. Okay, this is a question we get all of the time. So what's the difference between an agent and a manager?
It depends on the market to some degree, but I'm going to give you the definitional difference and then I'll give you the practical difference. The definitional difference is that agents are bonded and licensed by state entities to procure work on behalf of their clients. So basically, agents are people who are supposed to get you jobs. Managers, on the other hand, is a shortening of the word personal manager. And initially, what we're supposed to do is we guide and advise your career. That's what managers are definitionally supposed to do. Practically speaking, it depends on what stage of your career that you're in. When you're starting out with somebody, chances are you're likely going to have a manager before you have an agent. So there's not going to be a significant, practical difference between your manager and your agent. We will both get you appointments. We will both, try to get you up and running. Where the only difference that I would say when you're starting out that you'll notice is that managers will be more in the micro components of your fledgling career, meaning that we will help you find a photographer, we'll put your reels together, we'll do all that kind of stuff. And an agent won't necessarily do that by virtue of the fact that they'll have more clients and they're not interested in necessarily doing that part. That's what managers are for. So That's when you're starting out. So if you have a Venn diagram, the Venn diagram looks kind of like that, okay, when you're starting out. But as your career develops, the Venn diagram really does start pulling apart. And really what that means is that for clients that are more advanced and more developed, people who either are on series, getting close to being on series, or have been on multiple series, then I'm really more of like the CEO of their company. And I'm making sure that the various components are all functioning properly. You know, the agency I view as kind of the sales department. You know, the publicist is the marketing, you know, department. You know, the business manager is obviously, you know, the finance department. The lawyer is legal. And so for me, my job is to make sure all those pieces are working together. And if there's pieces that need to be added and or replaced and or fixed, that's my job too. So, you know, I do that in conjunction with the client, but the biggest part of my job ultimately is to make sure that the client has a through line to their career and that we're staying on track with making sure that they're either maintaining what they're doing or advancing towards the goal that they've set. So, you know, the too long didn't read version of that is agents get you jobs, managers make sure that the jobs you're getting lead to the things that you want. That's kind of the basic way.
Amazing. Oh, that was so great, Ray. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So how does an actor get work in this industry, and how do they get management or get
Yeah, there's a few things. I would say that the first thing, and it sounds so basic, but you don't luck into a career in acting. All the stuff that we say is basically a mythology to create the illusion that you don't have to work to get this, that these people who are actors with long careers somehow stumbled into it. No, you don't really stumble into it. You have to train. And unlike a lot of other things, I would say that, like, of the creative professions, I would say that acting has more of a corollary to athletics than it does anything else, because you have to have the ability, number one, and you either have it or you don't. Some people with all the training in the world just can't emote. It's impossible for them, right?
Yeah.
But the other part of it is that you have the basic skills, you still have to train. And so you have to do that level of work. So to get back to your original question, how do you get started? The first thing to do is get into some classes and get some rudimentary skills. You know, and frankly, figure out if you like it or not. It's not easy, and you have to do the work. There's no way around it. So if you don't enjoy the work of being an actor, you're not going to enjoy being an actor. That's just, you know, basic, because you won't get famous. None of those things that you think are awesome. By the way, fame is not awesome, despite what people think. You know, you're not going to get that unless you're good. So anyhow, get into classes, get training. Then the next thing you want to do is make sure that your materials are up to speed. Never send out a picture or a reel that you don't like. If you don't like it, I guarantee you that the people who need to see it and respond to it aren't going to like it either. So never make an excuse. And then the next thing to do is to figure out how to get in front of the people who make a difference. You know, if you're living in a small town someplace, try to do plays, try to do local commercials. There's generally outlets to try to do that work. But if your goal ultimately is to, you know, have a career doing this, and you're going to have to figure out a way to be represented, be represented by somebody who's legitimate in the industry, or get to a market that has a legitimate industry. Like, it's, you know, those are not mutually exclusive, but those are definitely things you'll have to do. So get in class, put your materials together, and then find a way to get in front of somebody who matters, you know. And I think that, you know, to what you guys are doing, CMTC is like a really good way to do that. Like, that's one of the paths, not the only path, but it is one of the paths. So yeah, that's what I would say, probably the get start, like from zero to like moving a little bit. That's probably the things you have to do.
Perfect. And that's a great kind of segue into my next question. So what does it take to maintain success or be successful once you're in a competitive market like LA?
Yeah, I mean, you have to constantly be training. It is the difference between people who have long-lasting careers and people who don't. Look, if you're good enough and do enough training, you can get lucky. But your luck will not last if you're not constantly training. And that is the difference. You know, even people that you wouldn't think necessarily go to class, they do. Like all those people, like, you know, people like movie stars, or what you would consider a movie star, they go to class or they have an acting coach. They are constantly training. So to maintain a career, you have to make sure that your skill set is constantly being updated, that you're constantly working on your ability and staying, tip top in that regard. The other thing is just make sure that you are taking jobs that lead to other things. I think one of the most, there's always an element of fear factor for people where they will, where they'll take any job just because it shows up. But if you're actually up and running, you need to make sure that the jobs you're taking lead to other things. Not all jobs are created equally, and frankly, how you get introduced to certain casting offices is a big part of having forward momentum. So that's one part of it. Okay, so like the training part of it. The other part of it, frankly, is network and make sure that you are aware of what industry trends are, of what the shows are out there. Do that kind of work too, because training isn't just the acting work, it's also being somewhat knowledgeable about what the marketplace looks like. Most of the work at this point is in television, quite frankly, and the prestige shows are things like on Netflix and Amazon and stuff like that. But to that degree, when you are hopefully in a position that you're auditioning for things, that you also know what shows you're auditioning for. So if you get an audition for, let's say, NCIS, that the style of that show versus an audition for, let's say, The Flash. You have to know the difference. And so I think that, like, to stay working in LA, you have to just make sure that your skills are top notch, that you're aware of the industry. And then the other component of it is that your physical vehicle needs to look like what it's supposed to look like. And then the other part of it is that your materials represent what your ability is and what your physicality is. So to that point, make sure that your materials are always up to speed, that you have, current headshots, that you have current reels, and those are updated and timely. Because if they're not, then that's not going to help you sell yourself to whomever you need to sell yourself to.
Yeah. So for example, like Jessica Lord, she would have to continue training for dancing as well as acting if she wants to.
Yeah, she would have to maintain those skills, even, I'll give you a good example. Jessica had a very good pilot season this year. She tested twice. She was in the mix for a lot of things. She's on the radar of the networks at this point.
Yeah.
And even as somebody who'd been on a show for 3 seasons, she still coached for all her auditions. So that means that she went and worked with somebody on all her auditions. And, for somebody who was essentially new to the LA market, she did really, really well. And so that's something that I think gets lost in the, mix, that you have to do that. So for Jessica, absolutely, she's still dancing, she's still taking classes, she's doing all that stuff, and she's the lead of an international show for 3 years.
Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
It really is, and it is. If you are at CMTC, you are not developed yet. You're at the beginning of your journey. And what I look for, and maybe this is probably a question you might ask me down the road, but like what I look for is, I'm looking for the basic foundational ability. I'm not expecting that somebody at CMTC is Oscar worthy. What I am looking for, though, is I'm looking for aptitude. I'm looking for the ability to be amenable to instruction, to be willing to listen, to do all those things. But I have even Jessica, who obviously is somebody that I found at CMTC, it took about 18 months before she really started hitting her stride. And that was and so she had gone from CMTC, which put her in front of me and frankly other talent reps. Yeah. She ultimately wound up signing with me, but I still had to place her in another market. She still had to do training. She still had to get the auditions. She still had to book the auditions. She was not ready to book right out of CMTC. She was ready to book probably a year after CMTC. So my message to the attendees is, don't be discouraged by the outcome. This is really, more than anything, I don't think anybody at the convention has the assumption that you are 100% fully formed. Yeah. And the other thing that I would say this as well is that, like, divorce yourself from the outcome, meaning that look at it as an experience, look at it as an opportunity to meet people, look at it, and frankly, look at it as an opportunity to do something that's very unique. But if your expectation is I go to CMTC and 2 weeks later I'm on a show, that's an unreasonable expectation. Your expectation should be, I'm going to go to CMTC, I'm going to have a lot of fun, I'm going to do something I really love, I'm going to meet some people in the industry, if not a lot of people in the industry. Something may come of it, something may not come of it immediately, and something may come of it down the road. But it's really more about the experience than anything else.
Exactly. Well put, Ray. Thank you. What are essential components of a great audition or a great self-tape?
Yeah, there's two things. Okay, I'm going to break that into two parts. I'll start with in-person, and then I'll talk about self-taping. If you're going to go for an in-the-room audition, there's obviously the performance. Like that's a big part. That's the most critical part. But there's things leading up to it. When you walk into the room, you need to be confident. You need to walk in like you know what you're doing. View the people in that room as colleagues and not as people you've placed on a pedestal and you're intimidated by. If you're intimidated by the casting directors in the room, you won't get the job. It's that simple. You don't be arrogant. Like that's different. Don't walk in there like a jerk. Just be confident. The other thing I would say is also be confident in the choices you make. And what that also means is that you do the performance. If they ask you to redo it, then you redo it. By the way, being asked to redirect in the room is a good sign. It's not a bad sign. If you're not good, they will not redirect you. They don't have time to worry about it. They'll just move on. But the other thing is that if you do not get a redirect, don't ask them to do it another way. Just walk out of the room. Maybe it's yours, maybe it's not. That's the issue of being, what's the best way to put it? Being confident, right? So those are the in-person auditions. For self-tapes, we'll talk technical and then we'll talk a few kind of thematic things. Okay. Technically speaking, most people's smartphones have high-def video at this point. They have a pretty good microphone as well. So for the most part, you can film yourself using your phone. Shoot landscape, not portrait. In other words, not this. That's number one. Generally speaking, and in fairness, I realize that I'm in portrait. But that being said, also kind of frame yourself from kind of like mid-chest up. We need to be able to see you. We also need to be able to hear you, and we need to be able to hear you better than we can hear your reader. And I'm going to go to the reader in a second, so let's put a pin in that. So I need to be able to see you. I need to be able to hear you. So the see you part, you need to be well lit. Meaning that, look, I have a window open right now. If I did a fill light over here, in other words, meaning just turned on a light over here, it would probably be pretty good. So like, it doesn't have to be crazy. You don't have to go out and necessarily buy a three light setup. Although if you can, it probably would be a pretty decent investment. Yeah. But yeah, be well lit, mid range. I need to be able to hear you. And as far as what you're wearing, just wear something that is not too garish or busy or something along those routes. When you slate, and a lot of times they're going to ask for a slate, if not all the time, they're going to ask for a slate. You generally will say who you are, where what area you live in or where you're based. You don't have to say your age unless you're 18. If you're over 18, you can say over 18. But because of legalities, if you're under 18, you do need to say your age. So, if you're under 18, go ahead and say you're 15, 14, whatever the case may be. If you're over 18, you cannot just say I am over 18, or you don't have to give your age if they don't ask for it specifically. The other thing is that you will do a full body, and then you will push in. We need to see your whole figure. So you'll do a full body front, turn to each side, and then look back at the camera, and that's kind of how it is. The other thing is that when you get materials which are called sides, there's going to likely be more than one scene. It is not a continuous take. You can stop the camera. So you don't have to roll from one scene to the other. Just do a scene, stop it. If you want to redo it, redo it. That's the advantage of self-taping, is that you get an opportunity to redo things. So those are some of the kind of the quantitative things. The qualitative things are basically this. Get yourself the best reader possible. I can't emphasize that enough. There's nothing more distracting than somebody who's super monotone while you're trying to connect to the scene. So try to find somebody who's really good. Try to avoid recording yourself and reading back and playing your lines and working off of that. If push comes to shove, you can do it, but it's really hard to get away with. And even my most experienced actors have a difficult time with it. Just the timing isn't great. So So make sure you find a really good reader. The most important thing I would say is that connect, like just connect with the reader, like make sure that you are emotionally connected to the scene, emotionally connected to the person you're talking to. Like that's the most important part. And make strong choices. If you do have questions about the material, don't be afraid to ask. Like, what about this character? What about that? Those are all legitimate questions. And I think that people are afraid to ask about that kind of stuff. Don't be. Just if you get sides and you have certain questions about the character, about the scene, ask whoever sent you the sides. It's a reasonable expectation, and if you're not happy with your tape, don't send it, redo it, wait a day. Like it's better to not send something than it is to send something bad, in my opinion.
Perfect. And would you recommend taking a couple days, like for CMTC, they're given 2 weeks with the script and to film? Would you recommend taking time to learn the script?
Absolutely. Be off
Yeah.
book. Yeah, be off book. That's a technical thing too.
Okay.
If one of the most distracting things is somebody looking down at their sides when they're filming a self tape. Because if you have enough time, you should be off book. That's part of the thing of being an actor, is that you have to memorize lines and you have to read them back, and sometimes you have to do it really quickly. So to your point specifically, yes, take all the time you have, but absolutely learn the lines and learn the scene and sit with it. Speed is not of essence unless somebody tells you to do so. There's definitely, for my working actors, I at times will get opportunities where they have like less than 24 hours to turn it around.
Yeah.
But if you have 2 weeks, take your time to connect to the material. You don't have to rush. You don't get bonus points for that.
Exactly. And as far as reading into the script goes, how much room would you say an actor has to kind of make it their own versus staying in, I guess, for the character with the script?
Yeah, here's the best way to I can put it is this, is that your job is to make it your own, and to like work with it. It's a needle that you're threading, basically. You have to work within the parameters of the material, but you still have to bring something that's unique to you. That's really where your choices come in, right? And here's the thing, be bold in your choices, because that role may not be right for you, but if you did a really good job, people will remember you. I'll give you a good example, is I have a client who was on a series, and when she tested for it, she tested for the role opposite the one she actually landed. They changed her in the test. So do a good job. You will be remembered. And this gets back to kind of what you had said earlier in regards to CMTC. It's also appropriate for auditioning, which is like disconnect the outcome. In other words, do the best job you can, make strong choices, make the character your own, and then forget about it. I tell my actors that once they're done with an audition, to get amnesia about it and just forget about it. Because look, you may get feedback, you may not, but you never know. And it's not worth the mental anguish of questioning whether you got a part or not. If you get something, we will know. I've never had a situation where somebody's like, hey, we're going to offer the part, but we forgot to call you. Like, that doesn't work that way.
True. And I guess it's out of your control once you're out of the audition room.
It really is. And that is the thing. There's so many moving parts to an audition, and the choices, that it is out of your hands. So really all you can do is do the best job and hope that that's the one for you. And sometimes it will be, and a lot of times it won't be. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, Ray, one more question. What would you recommend for talent to prepare for CMTC? What can they maybe be doing at home, or any advice in doing that?
There's a couple things that I would recommend that they do. The first thing is practice your memorization. Like, I know it sounds really basic, but like, that is a skill, memorizing things. So like, practice your memorization. Watch the shows that are appropriate for you. In other words, if you're like 12, watch shows that 12-year-olds are on. If you're a teenager, watch shows that teens are appropriate, that are appropriate for you. And then the other thing is, see if you can find material that you can practice. There's scripts, there's all sorts of stuff online. Take advantage of some of those materials if they're available to you. But I think the more practice you get, the better off you are. And I think the one advantage that they have, because it's going to be a year out, I would just say basically this, is that they're not operating off of a week or two. I would say that just repetition, it really is like athletics. Just, if you want to be an actor, start acting, start doing the sides, start watching the things that you're right for, and see what those people do, and read books on acting, and read, and watch interviews with actors that are talking about their craft. Those things really do matter, because it does give you an approach on how to do this. So I would urge them to, one, act. 2, like I said, watch, read books on acting. And then number 3 is watch interviews with your favorite actors talking about how they do what they do. All that stuff will make a difference. So that would be my best advice going forward.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Ray, for taking time with me.
Absolutely.